Mikhail Botvinnik once famously described the French defence as a difficult and dangerous opening. Whilst this is true, the French defence is a very versatile opening, and in my opinion it's suitable for any player at all levels of competition. Now, CJS Purdy saw the French defence as an ideal choice for the busy player because a lot of the themes can just be picked up very easily and put into practice in our own games. But in my opinion, he settled for a rather passive way to play it, and so I've modified his choice to suit our times with a much sharper variation, one which is hardly known, certainly at club level, and packs a real punch. And we're going to kick off our investigation by looking at a game between Alexander Ivanov and Nakamura, two very strong grandmasters, and this was played at the 37th National Chess Congress in 2006. And the nice thing about our variation, first off, is that it can be used against both the Tarrasch variation, that's 3 knight d2 as we see here, and 3 knight c3. So already, by taking on e4 on move 3, we're cutting down on a lot of hard work. Of course, white normally recaptures on e4, and now Nakamura played our trademark move, knight to f6, putting an immediate challenge to white's knight on e4, and black's knight was removed. G takes f6, and this is the move which I'm going to recommend to you here. A very sharp choice. Black immediately accepts that his pawn structure is going to be downgraded, but in return he gets lots of dynamic options. Let me at this early stage map out black's plan for you. The first move black would love to play is b6. Then of course he wants to put his bishop on b7. By so doing, black immediately solves the problem for his bad French bishop. Bishop on c8 is the piece black often struggles to develop in the French defence. Here we get to develop that bishop on b7, and the bishop takes up a very nice aggressive post. If we think about the king side for a moment now, we can see that black can also consider the move rook to g8. The rook often teams up very well with the bishop on b7, putting pressure on the g2 square. I would say that's one of the main themes in this variation. Black often gets a very strong kingside attack by these means. Black completes his development usually by playing the bishop from f8 out to d6. This is by no means forced. The bishop can come to e7, but d6 is a nice aggressive post. Black will play his queen's knight to d7, and then after that black is looking for a good place to put his queen. Well, the queen can go to e7, or black might play c5 and put the queen on c7. The overall plan of this variation is to get a crushing kingside attack, and against lackluster white's play, that's exactly what black gets. Now let's just take a look at the game Ivanov-Nakamura now, because the grandmaster played the most natural move on the board, knight to f3, and I think this is the move which well, 99% of your opponents are going to choose. And now we get the key move b6, and left to his own devices, black is going to just enact precisely the plan I mentioned earlier. He's going to play bishop b7, he's going to play knight d7, bishop d6, develop all his minor pieces, castle on the queen side, and then go for the throat on the king side. So white decides to interrupt this plan with a sophisticated move, bishop to b5 check. And black is allowed the move c6 for free, but on the other hand, I suppose white's reasoning, when he plays c6, he blocks the long diagonal. So although the bishop has to retreat now to c4, white is hoping that the move c6 will not prove useful to black in the long run. I don't think that's a justifiable position, because I think black is probably planning to play c5 at some stage anyway, and so it's really a bit of a trade-off there. The move c6 isn't very harmful to black. In fact, it almost cuts the move d5 completely out of white's mind, and that's often a pawn break which white can use in this type of position to bust open the game. So no big deal for black, the how can I put it, refinement, bishop b5, and so Ivanov now played bishop c4. We're going to look at bishop d3 in the next game. That is also a possible choice for white. Okay, Nakamura played bishop b7, and Ivanov played bishop to f4, and this move makes a lot of sense to me because after bishop d6, white's intending to retreat the bishop to g3, and by doing that he hopes to block any black attack on the g file. Note that if black now plays rook g8, the bishop on g3 is in a very good spot, blocking the black attack. So Nakamura simply completes his development with queen to e7, white castles, knight to d7, white brings his rook to e1, and now black castles on the queen side. So model development for black in this system. Now how's black going to carry on the attack? Well, he's certainly looking to play the move h5 at some point. I think this will prove a very useful option for black. Black is also taking note of the fact that the white queen is on the same file as the black rook, and this leads to tactical possibilities, certainly involving the move c5, possibly involving the move knight e5. It all depends. We're waiting to see how the game shapes up. But certainly all those moves are very much on black's mind. But having completed his development, Ivanov thought to himself, well, I'm going to use my pawns to try and generate attacking chances. So he does, as a lot of players will do in this position. He decides to go for the throat by playing a4. And obviously this is a very important moment in the game, because white seems to have got his own attack going before black. Well, Nakamura played a5. That's not a move everybody would have chosen. So I just want to go back now and suggest an improvement for you on Nakamura's play. I believe the most accurate move in this position is c5, and I think it's very thematic too, because it opens up the black bishops against the white king side. c3 is perhaps the best move for white now, and I think just taking on d4 is a good idea, because the central capture and action distracts white from the automatic attack against the black king. Now there are two possibilities. White can capture with the pawn on d4. Then I think it's most accurate to take on g3. White recaptures. Black brings his queen into the newly created hole on b4. And if white plays rook c1, black plays king b8. And I would say black has very successfully interrupted white's idea of a kingside attack. More than that, black's got pressure against the isolated pawn on d4, and there are still some chances of a kingside attack, so black is perfectly okay here, although it's roughly equal. Going back to the position after c takes d4, a lot of safety first players will take back with a knight. Well, after that, black can prove that white's position is not so safe by taking on g3. Now the pawn on g3 gives black something to bite on and adds impetus to the idea of h7, h5. So I think black should play knight e5 now, and if white develops his bishop or undevelops his bishop, whichever way you want to put it, to f1, then I think h5 just gives black a very good game. And to my mind, this position exemplifies exactly what black is trying to do in this position. All his pieces are active, the black king is relatively safe, and black's getting ready to take a can opener to white's king with the idea of, let's say, h4 or possibly rook d to g8. Whichever way you look at it, black has an excellent game here. But for some reason on that day, Nakamura decided to go a5. And I suppose he figured when he played that move, well, I know I'm moving up a pawn in front of my king, but it's going to take white an awful long time to open up lines against the king side, and so I'm going to just get on with my own attack whilst he's trying to open up lines. So c3 was played, and Nakamura went knight to f8. Queen to b3 was played. Again, I don't think that's best. Just going back, in a position like this where the players have castled on opposite sides, it's really time to throw caution to the winds. And so, in my view, a much more consistent move from Ivanov's side of the table would have been b4. I think white mustn't count the cost in a position like this. He's just got to open up the lines. And I think after a takes b4, bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, queen b3, white is well on the way to really opening up the black king. We'll just take play on a little bit further because it is quite interesting. Let's say black takes on c3 in this position. White recaptures. He could, of course, taken on b6. In my view, white's got quite a promising attack in this position because he's threatening moves like rook e to b1. He might even be threatening a move like a5. Black's position looks pretty unpleasant, although of course it's unclear. It all depends what your taste is. In a position like this, you might like to go into this and try and defend it out. There are not many players who would. So it's pretty surprising to me that if we drop back to the position after knight f8, Ivanov rejected that choice and instead preferred queen to b3. But of course he now can't lever open the black king using pawns. But okay, he's putting pressure on b6, that's fair enough. Nakamura retreated with bishop c7. White went bishop f1, and now black sounds the charge with h5. Knight h4. In a way, that's an artificial move. White's trying to stop black's attack with pieces, really. Well, those pieces can be moved out of the way. And I'm not too sure that's very effective, knight h4. Perhaps Ivanov had the move knight f5 on his mind, with, of course, the pin of the rook against black's queen being an interesting feature of the position. Well, whichever, if Nakamura decided to ignore that and play rook g8. Of course, Nakamura is a very fearless player, so the adoption of this variation wouldn't have worried him one bit. He knows that this particular line hasn't got a great reputation, but, you know, he figures he's confident in his own powers and he knows the main ideas to go for the throat. Perhaps he figured on Ivanov being a very nervous character or hesitant. Certainly the move queen b3 a few moves ago would tend to suggest that at critical moments in the game, perhaps Ivanov is not as incisive as he might be. So, well, white decided to go knight f5, and now black played queen to d7, keeping in touch with the bishop and his king. And white went back with the knight to e3. Okay, king b8 was played. Rook a d1. And now another very thematic move in this system, pawn to f5. No expenses spared in launching the pawns against the white king. Please note that castling short in this system for white is, well, if not a mistake, certainly very dangerous. It's much more dangerous than the average club player is going to appreciate. They might think, well, I'll just castle, it's a natural move, let's get on with it. But in fact, when white castles on the king side in this line, he's often castling directly into black's attack. So that's a fact worthwhile remembering. Even grandmasters might make that mistake, as we see here. Well, white went knight c4, continuing his odyssey, and now of course he's attacking b6 twice with queen and knight. So black moves to stop it with king a7. Bishop h4. He's still trying to defend against the h-pawn advance using his pieces. Rook c8, and now knight came into e5. Well, of course, black doesn't want to surrender his dark square bishop in this position for the knight, however impressive that white knight might be, so the queen just retreats to e8. And now Ivanov plays c4, again trying to lever open the black king position using his pawns. What can I suggest for him? Well, queen c2 is a possibility, clearing the way for b4. Against that, well, there are some interesting possibilities. I think c5 is one interesting move, opening up the bishop on b7 against the pawn at g2. Remember, that's a very thematic idea in this system. And, well, I think c5 just gives black an excellent position here, certainly in practical terms, because if I just take play on a little bit, if white tries the very, very sharp and wild bishop b5, although the black queen's trapped and lost, the white king is in great peril. For instance, rook takes g2 check is a very interesting move. And if king f1, bishop takes e5. This is a queen sacrifice, it's true, but look at the compensation black is getting here. The white king is completely open. And let's just take this variation on a bit further. Black brings his bishop in, threatening checkmate on h1. Yes, that is actually checkmate. If white tries to run away with king e1, then we have ideas such as rook h1 check king d2, rook takes d1. And if, of course, white doesn't want to re-sacrifice his queen here, he's got to play king e3. We've still got completely crazy play going on, which of course might suit Nakamura down to the ground. And then how about rook h1? With numerous threats and a very bizarre position. Well, this is just one possibility among many. But it does give you a flavour of the wild complications that can actually occur when this variation is employed. So, aside from being unusual, it's also a lot of fun to play this way with black. So going back to the position after Queen E8 and picking up on Ivanov's C4 now, black gets the chance to activate his queen's bishop without even needing to offer his queen in this line by playing the thematic move C5. And this is another move worth committing to memory, because if you're going to get a successful attack against the white king, you're going to almost always have to play this move, opening up new vistas for the bishop on B7. And it's worthwhile repeating that this configuration is a very dynamic one, and it furnishes black with excellent attacking chances. Well, okay, white played F3, hoping to blunt the diagonal. C takes D4. Excuse me, C takes D4. Bishop F2 was played. And that's probably a mistake. It was a tense position. I mean, white's probably got to play if we take the move back. Rook takes D4. He might not have liked that move because, of course, the rook's on the same diagonal as the king. That can be quite uncomfortable. And it's true that black retains excellent attacking chances here, possibly with the move, let's say, knight G6, rooting the knight out of E5 and clearing open the diagonals for black's Horwitz bishops. But, well, after bishop F2, there came a sudden collapse, because after F6, black was well on top. Queen comes to C6. Threatening queen takes F3. Bishop takes D4 was played. And now how about queen D6? The last few moves of this game give me the feeling that Ivanov was in time trouble, because he's playing well below his normal standard. But I think he was very rattled by black's sudden kingside attack. And of course here, there's a fork in the position. The black queen is threatening both the bishop on D4 and the pawn on H2, which of course brings the game to a speedy conclusion. Nakamura is renowned for his remarkable tactical ability. This is child's play to him, but it does give you a further thematic idea in the position. White can't defend both of the pieces. So Ivanov played queen C3, and you know what? Nakamura didn't even take on H2. How arrogant is that? He played bishop takes F3. And faced with the numerous black ideas, such as bishop takes D1 and queen takes H2, white, of course, decided to resign. So, an excellent game to illustrate our system, and it just shows you, even at Grandmaster level, black can get a massive kingside attack using G takes F6.